Hello sa inyong lahat! In my previous videos, na-mention ko na we should avoid testing the child by asking mga, who's this? What's that? Na lagi na lang paulit-ulit, what's that? What's that? What's that? For them to answer. But I don't mean that we do not teach them how to answer and ask their own questions because it's actually a super essential skill. So this video is going to be about different kinds of WH questions when we should expect that our children should be able or at least attempt to try to answer them na, and at the very end, tips on how to teach them without testing. So tara, usap tayo. Let's get talking. Magandang umaga! If you're new here, I'm Teacher Kaye and I'm a certified speech-language pathologist. So like I said, today is about answering questions. I already have a video on how to teach your kids to answer yes or no questions, but today our focus is about the WH questions. And ito napakaraming kinds of WH questions, and once they understand how this works, paano nila sasagutin ito, how to answer these, how to ask their own questions, it will open them into a whole different world of learning where they can collect their own information about themselves, confirm information about things that they're learning about their environment and the things that are happening around them, and so on. Sobrang daming benefits ng WH questions. This is also very important for academic preparedness because, you know, in school, syempre, dun meron tayo actual testing. So they learn things and then eventually they will have to take exams and tests and quizzes, and all those will be in the form of questions. So knowing how to answer all these different kinds of questions are very functional for every day, but also for their academic careers. But most important of them all is this is also good for their social development, because asking questions and answering questions is what we do when we're having conversations or discussions with everyone, our friends, our parents, our family, and that is how our lives are enriched when we talk to other people, get information from them, tell them what we think about something else. And that's why I don't know if you can tell, but I'm so excited because I love teaching WH questions. But not all WH questions are created equal. Kaya kids don't learn them at the same ages. Some of the types of questions are easier and some of them are more complex. So just to give you a brief background, let's talk about the different kinds of WH questions. So there's what question or ano, at ang sagot nito ay dapat object or bagay. We have our where questions or saan, and ang sagot nito ay dapat isang place o lugar. The simplest forms of what and where questions can already be answered by babies 1 to 2 years old. So some examples of these are, what's that? Or, nasaan si Teacher Kaye? We also have our what doing or ano gawa type of questions na ang sagot ay dapat action or galaw. We also have our who questions or sino. At ang sagot ay usually a person or sometimes if the characters are animals, pwede ring animals. And these types of questions are usually answered by children between 2 to 3 years old. So some examples of these questions are, what are you doing? Or, oh, look, who's that? Usually around this time, 2 to 3 years old, natututo na rin sila to ask their own questions. So, syempre, yung matatanong nila ay yung medyo mas naiintindihan nila. So, the first types of questions that they learn to ask ay yung natutunan nila nung 1 to 2 years old sila, which are our what and where questions. Like, they can already start to ask, where, daddy? By the time they reach 3 years old, pwede nang pahirap ng pahirap or nagiging complex na yung mga questions na nasasagot nila. So these are the same types of question words na natutunan na nila, like what, where, who, and what doing. But instead now, if just talking about one element like what's that, pwede nang what are you eating? So now it's talking about an object na meron kang ginagawang action. So, di ba medyo mas mahirap na yung ganun? And you can have so many different kinds of questions. Depende lang talaga sa pagka-build mo nung tanong mismo. So, pwede na siyang about associations. What do you wear on your feet? So, meron ka ng maraming elements kasi what is the object na may ginagawa kang action na sinusuot mo sa isang certain body part. So, dapat lahat na yon alam ng bata. Also, at 3 years old, they will start to know how to answer why or bakit. At ang sagot dito usually needs knowledge on cause and effect. Logic na ito. So yan, mas complex na talaga. And because we're already touching on logic and critical thinking, meron na rin tayong how questions or paano, which talks about the process of something. Kung paano nagagawa ang isang bagay. And kasama na rin yan is answering if and then what kind of questions. So now we have hypothetical thinking or making inferences. Like, if you are hungry, what will you do? What will you eat? And the last types of WH questions that they learn at around 4 years old is when or kailan. Kasi medyo abstract na yung thought of the answer, which is a temporal concept. Because mahirap ipakita unless we're only talking about time or dates in a calendar. Pero generally, mas abstract ang time concepts. And also at around this time when they're one-to-one correspondence with numbers, ay mas nagiging solid na. That means that it's not just rote counting, memorizing 1, 2, 3, but actually seeing 3 objects and knowing that, there are 3 items here. And that is when they learn to start answering questions of how many are there or ilan. For example, ilan ang kiss na gusto mong ibigay ni mommy? So now, let's talk about prerequisites or ano yung kailangan nilang skills for them to be able to answer questions. Now that we've talked about the different kinds of WH questions, that is the first prerequisite, is understanding what each question word means. Because they do not mean the same things and they do not have the same complexities or hindi sila magkakasing hirap. Next, they also have to understand the other words that are included in the question. So, lahat ng vocabulary na gagamitin nyo with the question word. So, they have to understand the question word what and then the word that you put after it. So, for example, what are you eating? Alam ba nila yung ibig sabihin ng eating? Dapat din naiintindihan nila yung grammar at syntax or yung pagkakabit-kabit ng mga salita sa isang phrase or sentence para they make sense. For example, alam na nila yung salitang kuya at bag, pero alam ba nila na kapag sinabi mong, where is kuya's bag? Ibig sabihin yung bag ni kuya. Hindi lang any bag, but kuya's bag. Possessive na. And for some of the more complex questions that require critical thinking, familiar ba sa kanila yung sitwasyon or the context kung saan nangyari yung isang bagay? So for example, you're talking about if and what questions, yung hypothetical na minention ko kanina, nangyari na ba yun sa kanila? Naranasan na ba nila yun? For them to understand how to answer the question. And everything I just mentioned is still in the comprehension part of the question. After pa nun, let's say, okay, naintindihan nila yung question. Now, do they have enough experience, vocabulary to formulate, make their own answer para masagot nila yung tanong mo? So it's all really very complex. So now that we've talked about the requisites or yung mga kailangang meron silang skills, now here are some tips on how to introduce these WH questions to your kids. But like I said in the intro, how do we ask questions without it being like testing? So number 1, when you model the question, immediately give the answer. So walang pressure for them to answer. You are just making them familiar with the question words, the type of question, and the type of answer that it requires. Para maintindihan nila na every time sinasabi ni mommy, who? Who's that? Look, who is that? Ang sagot ay laging tao or hayop. Pwedeng tuwing papasok si daddy ng room, sabi mo, oh, look, who's that? Daddy! Who's that? Daddy! Yay! Ganun lang. And you don't expect them to answer. You just keep doing it until eventually magkiklik yan sa kanila one day. Tas sila na kapag sinabi mo, oh, who's that? Sasabihin nila, da or daddy. Like I already mentioned, number 2, start with one element first and then build from there. So when you're starting to ask them where questions, instead of, where's mommy's pillow? Mahaba agad yun. Meron agad concept of possessives. Meron ng mommy, meron pang pillow. So masyadong maraming elements. So start first with single things. Where's the bear? Where is the milk? Where is ate? Number 3, always start with things that are easily perceivable. Perceive, what does that mean? Yung magagamitan natin ng ating senses. So always start with items that they can see right in front of them, hear, smell, taste. Something that is very, very obvious and hindi abstract. So don't ask them about things that are not here at this moment because mas mahihirapan sila to make an association of what is mommy talking about. Number 4, always highlight the words when you are looking through books together. So I didn't even say reading books together, but I just mean you can look at pictures or visual scenes in your books. So for example, in this picture, wala namang actual story or text na nakasulat, but I can use this to teach WH questions like, oh my gosh, what are these? What's this? They're big trees. What's that? Big trees. What's that? Long branches. Oh, there are 2 characters here. Who's that? Who is that? That's Winnie the Pooh. Someone is with Winnie the Pooh. Who is with Winnie the Pooh? It is Piglet. They are friends. Let's look. What are they doing? Pooh's foot is raised. Nakataas yung paa ni Pooh at ni Piglet at parang pumupunta sila forward. What are they doing? Walking. They are walking together. Pero nagkakatinginan din sila. So maybe they're also talking. Blah, blah, blah. What are they doing? Talking. And now let's look. There are trees. It is outdoors because we can see the clouds outside. There are flowers and there's so much space. Nasaan kaya sila? Where are they? I think they're in a field. Where are they? In a field. So if you notice, I gave pauses just in case they want to answer again after I've given the model. But if they don't answer, just give the answer again. So lagi kong sinasabi, teaching is modeling. It's not always about testing. So that is the difference between asking questions and testing, is that when you test, you expect a response. So when we teach questions or anything else for that matter, model, model, model first. Testing later. And that's it for today for our answering questions. I hope na marami kayong natutunan. Next time po siguro I'll go into detail about the different types of things you can ask with the different types of question words. Kasi marami kang pwedeng itanong with what questions, with who questions, depending on ano yung ibang mga words na ikakabit mo. If you like this, please show me with a thumbs up. It will be so easy. Kiklik nyo lang po yan, but it makes a world of difference to me. And kung naisip nyo yung mga iba nyong kumare at kumpare that might benefit from this, i-share nyo na rin po sa kanila. And if you're not yet part of this community, please click that red subscribe button and I would love to have you with us learning here all the time. You may leave me a message on my Facebook and Instagram at Teacher Kaye Talks. Pwede rin po kayo mag-comment dito and I'll try to get back to them when I can. And hanggang sa muli, happy talking and mabuhay!